Tonight on CFTK-TV News, the trickle-down effects of tariffs threats south of the border. We examine the buy local and buy Canadian movement that's sprung up, and a new study on microplastics.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on this Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. I'm Jaylene Matthews. We begin tonight with our news that's local to the Northwest. The Terrace RCMP are in the midst of investigating a missing persons case. Lillian Guy is the person the Terrace RCMP are currently searching for, and according to a police report, she was last seen on January 29th. Guy's description is that of a 74-year-old Caucasian woman who weighs 130 pounds, is 5'4" in height, and has brown hair and green eyes. Anyone with information is asked to call the Terrace RCMP or Crime Stoppers. Recently, the town of Smithers updated us on one of their bylaws related to the town's recreation fees and charges. These fees are said to be reviewed every 3 years in order to make sure they reflect the rates in similar communities and properly align with cost recovery practices in Smithers. Anyone looking to give feedback can do so by speaking at the February 11th Smithers Town Council meeting. The Ministry of Environment and Parks has issued an air quality advisory for the town of Houston. The advisory is due to high concentrations of fine particulate matter that will likely stick around until at least the local weather conditions change. People in the area with medical conditions such as asthma, heart disease, and diabetes are advised to avoid straining physical activity until the air quality improves. And in Prince Rupert, the Rush Brook Trail that spans a total of 1.7 kilometers will be closed down for the entirety of February. The reason for the closure, according to the City of Prince Rupert, is that work is being done to further accessibility to the trail, and some safety concerns will be addressed. Some potential alternatives for people looking to take a hike include the Seal Cove Salt Marsh Loop or the Cloudberry Trail. Coming up next, the unifying wave of patriotism sweeping the nation. Thanks for staying with us. British Columbia Premier David Eby says his government will pause its response to threatened American tariffs after the 30-day reprieve was negotiated between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Donald Trump. Eby says alcohol made in U.S. Republican states will be going back on the shelves of government-run liquor stores, but that doesn't mean the province will abandon its plans, and it will be prepared for a possible social media post from Trump saying tariffs are back on. The Premier says even as the tariffs are paused, harm has already been done to the Canadian economy and to the relationship between the two countries. And although they are off for the moment, tariffs have brought a lot into question and new issues into the spotlight in Canada. CTV's Heather Wright explains.
American booze will stay on Canadian shelves, and Ontario will continue its Starlink deal with Elon Musk. For now.
We want to work together. We never asked for this fight. We don't want to fight.
Appearing on CNN, Ontario Premier Doug Ford reiterated his hope that Donald Trump will back down, but in a statement acknowledged the threat remains. Canada and Ontario continue to stare down the threat of tariffs, he said, adding, with the uncertainty, we will continue to see many potential projects frozen and projects that were already underway put at risk. Experts say the uncertainty will likely exacerbate Canada's existing productivity problem, making companies think twice about investing or hiring in Canada.
Companies are going to be risk averse, even more so than before, if they think that there are these major traumatic events like we almost had, maybe we'll have in 30 days.
And there are also calls for Canada to do more to diversify its trading partners, which is a challenge.
Our big trading partners, in fact, we do have free trade agreements with them. So who's, at fault for the fact that 77% of our exports go to the United States? To some extent, nobody's at fault except our geopolitical, situation.
Still, some are taking the next 30 days as a chance to recalibrate.
We all have to do our part to support Canada.
There are also growing calls for Ottawa and the provinces to do more to tear down interprovincial trade barriers, Red tape that ranges from different regulations to taxes that increase costs for producers.
A 2022 report suggests opening provincial trade could increase the size of Canada's economy by $200 billion, though the report warns it would take time for any change to have an effect.
And in the wake of all this, one positive outcome has been the wave of patriotism that's swept the nation. Here's CTV's Paul Hollingsworth.
Canadians in massive numbers are highlighting their level of frustration, patriotism, and national pride.
It's nice to see Canadians, give a punch back. It's nice to even see Justin Trudeau give a little punch back.
For some, it's music to their ears.
I think so. I hear people talk about how they want to stand up for Canada and be strong.
Others have adopted a buy local strategy as a pushback against the U.S. president.
I pick up. Okay, if that tomato sauce has been U.S., I'm going to lay it back on the shelf.
Some Canadian sports fans went the extra step of booing the American national anthem in several cities.
I loved it. They did it in Vancouver. They did it at the Ottawa game. They did it in Toronto Raptors, and I think it's super cool. Just to show them, hey, we're your closest allies, and it just shows them we're here and we're going to fight back.
To suggest booing the Star-Spangled Banner represents the majority opinion of Canadians might be a stretch, but it's a loud statement that has generated a lot of attention, and those living south of the border have taken notice.
Whether this is representative of all Canadians, I would be hesitant to say so. It's not just the 17,000 people or whatever who are at the game, right? It's instantly on social media, news outlets pick it up, it travels across the world.
Historically speaking, one could argue Canadians have always had a strong sense of patriotism, but not in a loud and robust way. This surge in reaction over the past several days especially is something we are not used to seeing.
Along with the wave of patriotism has come a huge movement of citizens choosing buy local and buy Canadian. CTV's Alison Bamford has that story.
These days, what goes in your cart comes with a lot of thought.
I'm looking for stuff that fits my diet and that fits my cost profile.
And for many, Canadian products now top the list, hoping to send a message south of the border.
We're going to go Canadian. We got to get back at them.
Just go and buy Canadian stuff.
The Buy Canadian sentiment is gaining momentum online and at the till. But what does that really look like?
Ultimately, what we're looking for is product of Canada and made in Canada. Both have a different threshold for what amount of product in them is actually Canadian product.
Made in Canada means at least 51% of the product's content is Canadian. A product of Canada means its content is 98% Canadian. That could include raw materials, labor, or manufacturing.
And it might not be pure, there could be other interests from other countries there, but chances are you're employing some workers to do something in Canada.
Lists circulating on social media are helping identify alternative brands to popular American ones, like Old Dutch instead of Lay's chips, or Armstrong instead of Kraft cheese. And websites like Made in CA or Manufactured in have compiled lists of Canadian products. But experts say lines can get blurry if you're looking at cutting out American companies altogether.
You got to be careful too, because you might say, okay, I'm going to go after this American company, but they have a factory in Canada and they employ hundreds of people.
If you don't have time to research each product, local grocers and small businesses tend to have more Canadian items than big chains. President's Choice and Compliments brands are safe Canadian bets, and anything with a Blue Cow label signals a Canadian dairy product. Of course, this is all just food for thought. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
An earthquake struck just off the south of Haida Gwaii this past Saturday. The earthquake reportedly measured 4.3 on the Richter scale, although no one reported being able to feel it. The quake did not result in either an earthquake early or tsunami warning being issued. And now we take a look at our Northwest BC weather forecast. On the north coast this evening, clear and windy with winds gusting up to 50 kilometers an hour. Except through mainland inlets and valleys, there it'll be 90-kilometer winds gusting to 110. Tonight in Terrace, it'll be clear and cold with a low of -13 and wind chill -18 this evening and -23 overnight. In the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District this evening, it'll be clear with winds up to 15 kilometers an hour with a low of a chilly -28. There's a risk of frostbite. This week on the North Coast, you'll get another day of sunshine tomorrow before it gets a little cloudier in the week with a 60% chance of flurries and the weather sitting just above freezing. This week in the Terrace area, we can expect the sunshine and frigid temperatures to last through until Friday. The temperature will sit around -7 for most of the week. In the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the week is looking bright and cold, with the average temperature sitting around a crisp -13 degrees. Taking a look at our highways around the Northwest now. On Highway 16, watch for slippery sections and expect winter driving conditions. On Highway 37, slippery sections. On Highway 37A, watch for slippery sections and compact snow. On Highway 118, beware of blowing snow. On the Nisga'a Highway, there's slippery sections as well. And on Telegraph Creek Road, more slippery sections. And this is what the roads were looking like from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, the harrowing truth from a new study on microplastics. Welcome back. Down in Vancouver, they've had a pretty significant snowfall that's brought traffic to a standstill in some areas. Here's CTV's Ben Nesbitt with that story.
Snow and ice coated the road along Highway 1 in Langley, leading to periodic closures. The conditions proved to be too much for some trucks to handle. Tow trucks were called in to get them out of there.
The biggest decision that has to be made is, do you need to go? And if you are going to go, do you have the equipment to go? That's the professional judgment of the driver, and too often that gets lost in haste and in the rush to get things where they need to be.
With a cold snap and potentially more snow in the forecast, officials are warning drivers to be aware of the treacherous conditions.
If you don't need to use the highways, particularly Highway 1, don't use the highway. If you do need to use it, leave extra time for your travels and make sure you have good condition snow tires.
On local roads, it really varies, but the cleanup could take some time.
There are pockets of areas that have been hit a little bit harder, and those might be a little bit difficult, but we get into them.
The conditions caused issues at YVR as well. After sitting on the tarmac for hours, this plane finally got de-iced, one of many delayed flights. Dozens were also canceled.
When we do see weather, we do have to slow down and make sure that our operations are safe and secure, and sometimes we do see an impact to flight schedules as a result. Our full snow operations is active right now, so all of our snow equipment and our de-icing facilities are fully active.
Environment Canada is warning that Tuesday's morning commute could be disrupted by more snow in various parts of the Lower Mainland. Ben Nesbitt, CTV News, Vancouver.
A new study on microplastics has turned up some alarming news about just how much is getting into our systems. Here's ABC's Lionel Moyes.
This morning, a new study is raising concern about microplastics after researchers found an entire spoon's worth inside samples taken from human brains.
They are tiny little shards of plastic, smaller than 5 millimeters. They found approximately 4,800 milligrams per gram of microplastics in brain tissue. And what the researchers are saying, this amount that they found pretty much equals a standard plastic spoon.
The study looked at brain samples collected in 2024, finding a 50% increase in microplastics compared to samples collected back in 2016.
We use plastic every day, and the amount of plastic that we've been using as human beings and just in the environment has really been increasing over time.
While the headline may sound alarming, doctors say the study of these microplastics is still in its early stages.
Definitely not enough research to draw any concrete conclusions.
Back in December, a study raised concern about black plastic commonly used in kitchen utensils, claiming it could expose users to dangerous levels of flame retardant. But the researchers later issued a correction, saying a math error had overstated the risk. In this study, despite the research being in its early stages, doctors say there are simple steps you can take now to reduce exposure to microplastics.
Metal, other things that we can use to store our food. That's a great alternative to using plastic. A single-use plastic container, only use it one time. And also kind of be cognizant of where you're storing plastics. Don't leave water bottles in cars that can heat up and increase your exposure to microplastics.
The study also found higher levels of microplastics in brain samples from dementia patients, but again, experts say it is too early to draw any conclusions on whether plastics can be linked to dementia. Lionel Moyes, ABC News, New York.
Turning to the markets now, Canada's main stock index was up more than 100 points, while the loonie also regained some of its strength against the US dollar. The Canadian dollar rose a little more than a penny, and the price of gold rose by over $9. Oil dropped by 74 cents, natural gas was down 11 cents, and aluminum was down $12.50. In Toronto, the TSX was up almost 38 points. The Venture Index was up nearly 16. In New York, the Dow Jones was up 134, and the Nasdaq was up 262. Still ahead, a look at the Super Bowl's opening night. Next, we hear a Live Aid superstar's thoughts on the President of the United States. Here's CTV's Andrea Case.
If Donald Trump thinks he's going to take on China, Canada, Mexico, and Europe economically, I wouldn't bet on Donald Trump very much.
Ask Sir Bob Geldof what he thinks of U.S. President Donald Trump, and he doesn't hold back.
This bloviating, bloated orange ball of narcissism and greed.
40 years ago, the Irish musician watched the first of its kind CBC documentary about the starvation of 32 million people in Ethiopia, and it changed his life forever. He was inspired and co-created the Live Aid fundraising song, Do They Know It's Christmas?, the Live Aid concert to feed the world, and the Band Aid Charitable Trust, which have raised over $251 million.
I just had an emotional reaction to something on the news, so I picked up my guitar to find some sort of response. Sting, I need you here by Sunday.
The story of how those events came together is an award-winning musical, Just for One Day, now on stage at the Ed Mirvish Theatre.
I'm particularly glad it's opening in Canada specifically at this time because of what's happening with that fool south of the border.
After the show, Geldof took to the stage to reiterate what he told CTV News. And while he was met with overwhelming support, one person in the balcony verbally disagreed.
This morning I had a mail. No, hold on.
Giving the objector a chance to respond, Geldof was met with silence.
What did you say, dude? Wanker.
10% of every ticket sold for the musical goes to the Live Aid Trust.
This couldn't be a better time or a better vehicle for displaying that.
Andrea Case, CTV News.
It's a simple way to send a message that has a pretty profound effect. CTV's Penny Daflos looks into the impact of Canada's recent spree of booing the American anthem at sports games.
From Raptors fans in Toronto to Senator supporters in our capital, Canadians responded to U.S. tariffs during the American national anthem. So by Sunday night in Vancouver, this was no surprise.
Before I got on stage, like the whole Canucks team warned me. They were like, this is going to happen.
Agasha Mutasasida is just getting her singing and songwriting career off the ground.
It's just you and me.
And doesn't have hard feelings given the outpouring of support she's received and the potential ramifications of a trade war.
I understand where that frustration comes through and why the booing happened. So it's not personal one little bit. And I had some people who did come to me and confess that they did boo, but they did appreciate my performance. So as a performer, like, I really feel like that did grow my experience.
A gracious response to an uncomfortable situation likely to continue.
Emotions may run high here and there, particularly around hockey games. But I know we're going to make it through this.
It takes a lot to get Canadians this riled up, and the negativity is out of character. Remember that Leafs game a couple years ago? Torontonians picked up the Star-Spangled Banner after the singer's mic died. CTV News reached out to the NHL to see how they plan to address the booing in Canadian cities going forward, but no one has responded. For Mutasasida, it remains an overwhelmingly positive experience because it's not just about a personal career highlight.
I'm someone that represents people in the disabled community. I feel like just having that visualization as an artist that is trying to navigate this industry that is not always accessible, having an opportunity like this on such a big scale is so important. It like shows that we're artists just like everybody else.
And that's something to cheer about. Penny Daflos, CTV News, Port Moody.
It was the Super Bowl's opening night, and we heard from some star players. Here's ABC's Danny New.
The biggest night in American sports and television is almost here, as Super Bowl week kicked off last night in New Orleans with its opening night ceremonies. Star players and coaches from the Chiefs and Eagles like Travis Kelce and Saquon Barkley were asked questions throughout the night by the media. However, when pressed, Kelce did have one question for the media in regards to online complaints that Kansas City gets special treatment from the officials.
Why are you guys leaning into this whole ref thing?
Touchdown, Kelce! Of course, folks also had to ask Kelce about how having a world-famous girlfriend like Taylor Swift pushes him.
Yeah, I better hold up my end of the bargain, right?
Who runs over his man, still on his feet, and he scores! Meanwhile, though, the Eagles star tight end Dallas Goedert was not as familiar with Miss Swift's work.
Is she the one that, did she sing Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls? She doesn't?
He hasn't seen too many balls today. He's going to read a little passage here.
Then there's Eagles top receiver A.J. Brown, who famously read an inspirational book during the opening playoff game that then shot up to #1 on the Amazon book charts. The three-time Pro Bowler was asked if he would be bringing the same book to the sidelines of Super Bowl 59.
Yeah, same one. I don't know if I'll bring it out, but it'll be the same one.
However, the moment that perhaps drew the most attention on social media was when Eagles coach Nick Sirianni received a surprise, very warm greeting. That's former All-Pro wide receiver Chad Johnson there. On Instagram, the NFL reacted with, "What the heck is going on?" But clearly Sirianni seemed quite happy to see him. 35-year-old Travis Kelce also responded to retirement questions by saying he still thinks he has a lot of good football left in him. He was also asked if he plans on proposing if the Chiefs win this weekend, and he said, "Next question." In New York, for ABC News, I'm Danny New.
That's our news for now. For more local news, visit cftktv.com. Thanks for watching.